Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is July 11th. On this day in 2015, one of the most powerful and notorious drug lords in the world managed to vanish from a Mexican maximum security prison for the second time. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the billionaire leader of the Sinaloa cartel, escaped from Altiplano Federal Prison through a tunnel that had been carved right into his cell. It was a mile long, equipped with ventilation and even a makeshift rail system. The entire operation was so shocking, so surreal, that it felt like something out of a movie. But it was real, and it revealed just how deep cartel influence runs in Mexico, especially inside the institutions meant to contain it. Today, we're unpacking the extraordinary second escape of El Chapo, how he pulled it off, who helped him, and what it said about corruption and power in the global drug war. Let's get started. Joaquin Guzman was born in 1957 in La Tuna, a tiny village in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. He grew up in poverty in a home surrounded by violence and drugs. His father was abusive and involved in growing marijuana, and by his teens, Guzman was already involved in the trade. He moved in with an uncle who was one of Mexico's earliest traffickers and quickly proved himself. By the 1980s, he was working under cartel boss Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo and handling major drug shipments. Eventually, he co-founded the Sinaloa cartel. Under Guzman's leadership, the cartel became a multinational drug empire, trafficking everything from marijuana to heroin and meth. He was ruthless, efficient, and almost untouchable. He was nicknamed El Chapo, meaning shorty for his height, and El Rapido for his speed in moving product. He operated with brutal precision, and the cartel became infamous not just for smuggling, but for mass killings, torture, and violence on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Despite multiple manhunts, Guzman eluded capture for years. He first escaped prison in 2001, supposedly hidden inside of a laundry cart. It would take more than a decade before he was finally caught again in 2014 in a dramatic raid at a beachside condo in Mazatlan. He was sent to Altiplano Prison, Mexico's most secure facility. But that wasn't the end of the story. Altiplano Prison, located in central Mexico, was designed to be escape-proof. The walls were a meter thick, the perimeter was monitored by elite forces, and the prison had a no-fly zone overhead. Cell phones were jammed, and guards were rotated regularly in order to avoid corruption. When El Chapo was sent there in 2014, officials knew the risk. He was placed under 24/7 surveillance, given no contact with other inmates, and allowed only 1 hour of recreation time per day. He wore an ankle bracelet that tracked his movements, at least within the walls. Everything about Altiplano was meant to contain the most dangerous people in Mexico. Yet, in just over a year, Guzman managed to outmaneuver it all. It was just before 9 p.m. on July 11, 2015, when prison staff noticed that El Chapo hadn't returned from his shower. That wasn't unusual at first. The shower area was the only spot in the cell not covered by cameras, for obvious reasons. But when 25 minutes passed with no sign of him, guards checked. And he was gone. What they found instead was a hole in the floor beneath the shower. It dropped down nearly 30 feet into a narrow tunnel. And that tunnel, incredibly, stretched over a mile underground and ended at a construction site in a rural neighborhood outside of the prison. This was no basic escape route. The tunnel was lit, ventilated, and equipped with rails for a modified motorcycle, likely used to haul dirt or even transport Guzman himself. It was an escape straight out of fiction, but it was all too real. The next morning, the news hit Mexico like an earthquake. El Chapo had escaped again. And this time it was even more embarrassing. President Enrique Peña Nieto was overseas at the time, and the incident plunged his administration into crisis. The escape came just months after officials had proudly declared El Chapo's capture a major victory in the drug war. That victory now looked like a farce. Investigations quickly turned inward. More than 20 prison staff were arrested or placed under scrutiny, including guards, engineers, and administrators. The escape couldn't have happened without inside help, and the evidence pointed to a deeply compromised system. Across the country, checkpoints were set up, airports were put on alert, Interpol issued a red notice, and U.S. authorities stepped in to assist. Still, Guzman had vanished. For 6 months, El Chapo was on the run. Then, on January 8, 2016, Mexican Navy Special Forces launched an operation in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, based on intelligence gathered by both Mexican and U.S. agencies. The raid, dubbed Operation Black Swan, ended in a shootout that left several cartel members dead. Guzman fled through a tunnel and stole a car, but he was finally caught on a highway just outside of town. President Peña Nieto tweeted the news, "Mission accomplished." A year later, in January 2017, Mexico approved his extradition to the U.S. Guzman arrived in New York, where he faced a 17-count indictment that included charges of drug trafficking, murder, money laundering, and more. His trial began in 2018. Witnesses included former cartel members, law enforcement, and even pilots who flew drugs across borders. The testimony revealed an empire of violence and billions in profits. On February 12, 2019, El Chapo was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years and ordered to forfeit over $12.6 billion. Today, he's held at the ADX Florence, the highest security prison in the U.S. El Chapo's 2015 escape remains one of the most dramatic prison breaks in modern history. But beyond the tunnel and the headlines, it serves as a reminder of how power and money can corrode even the strongest institutions. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!